In a small town surrounded by green hills and wide-open fields, there lived a woman named Clara. She was not someone who stood out in a crowd. Her clothes were plain, her hair always tied back in a simple bun, and her shoes worn from years of walking to and from the local bakery where she worked. But what made Clara special wasn't how she looked. It was the kindness in her heart. Everyone in the town knew her as the woman who would stop to help an elderly neighbor carry groceries or offer a listening ear when someone needed to talk. Clara didn't have much money, but she had something far more valuable: a deep sense of compassion. Clara's life was simple, almost too simple for some people's liking. She lived alone in a modest house that had been passed down to her from her parents. The walls were painted a soft cream color, and the furniture was old but well cared for. There were no fancy decorations or expensive gadgets, just a few books, on a shelf, some plants by the window, and a cozy chair where she liked to sit after long days at work. Despite her humble surroundings, Clara had one dream that seemed impossible to achieve. She wanted to play the piano. Music had always been her escape, a way to express feelings she couldn't put into words. As a child, she used to press her hands against the keys of the church organ during Sunday services, imagining what it might feel like to create melodies herself. But life had other plans for her, and the dream of playing music faded into the background. The townspeople often talked about Clara behind her back. Some admired her quiet strength, while others thought she was just another ordinary person living an unremarkable life. To them, Clara was predictable, a woman who followed the same routine day after day, never asking for more than she had. They didn't know about her secret longing for music or the way she sometimes stayed up late at night, staring out the window and imagining herself sitting at a grand piano, her fingers dancing across the keys. If they had known, they might have laughed. After all, Clara wasn't rich enough to afford lessons, let alone a real piano. How could someone like her ever become a musician? One summer evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, a group of teenagers gathered near the park. These kids were known for their mischief, always looking for ways to entertain themselves, at the expense of others. That night, they came up with a plan that seemed hilarious to them but cruel to anyone else. One of the boys remembered seeing an old, broken-down piano in his uncle's garage. It hadn't been touched in years, its once shiny surface now covered in dust and scratches. The keys were yellowed, some missing entirely, and the wood was cracked in places. "Let's give it to Clara," one of them joked, laughing so hard he nearly fell off the bench. The idea spread quickly among the group, each teenager egging the others on until they decided it was the perfect prank. Under the cover of darkness, the teenagers loaded the decrepit piano onto a rickety cart and wheeled it over to Clara's house. They propped it up on her porch, making sure it was visible from the street, and then ran off before anyone could catch them. When Clara stepped outside the next morning, she froze in surprise. There, right in front of her door, sat the battered piano. For a moment she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was clear that someone had left it there as a joke, perhaps even mocking her lack of wealth or status. Neighbors peeked out of their windows, snickering quietly as they watched Clara examine the instrument. Some felt bad for her, knowing how kind she was, but most assumed she'd simply roll her eyes and call someone to haul the useless thing away. But Clara did something unexpected. Instead of getting upset or embarrassed, she smiled softly and said, "Well, maybe this is exactly what I need." Her reaction puzzled everyone. Why would someone be happy about receiving such a useless gift? Was she pretending to take the prank lightly, or did she actually see value in the broken piano? No one could figure it out, least of all the teenagers who had played the trick. Over the next few days, Clara started spending time around the piano, inspecting it closely and occasionally running her fingers over the chipped keys. People passing by shook their heads, convinced she was wasting her time. Surely, nothing good could come from trying to fix something so obviously beyond repair. Yet Clara didn't seem to care what others thought. Something inside her told her that this piano, despite its flaws, held potential, and she was determined to uncover it. As weeks went by, Clara began devoting more and more of her free time to the mysterious project. She borrowed tools from neighbors, visited the library to research basic repairs, and spent hours watching instructional videos online. At first, progress was slow. The piano was in worse shape than she'd imagined, with rusted strings, warped wood, and internal mechanisms that barely functioned. But Clara refused to give up. Every evening after finishing her shift at the bakery, she would sit cross-legged on the floor surrounded by screws, hammers, and tuning forks, completely absorbed in her work. Her hands, usually covered in flour from kneading dough, were now stained with grease and dirt, but she didn't mind. This was her chance to bring something broken back to life, not just the piano but also a part of herself. Word of Clara's efforts spread throughout the town, though opinions remained divided. Some residents admired her determination, marveling at how she tackled such a daunting task without any prior experience. Others still saw her actions as foolish, believing she was chasing an impossible dream. Even the teenagers who had left the piano on her porch found themselves conflicted. At first, they had laughed about the prank, proud of themselves for pulling off such a clever stunt. But as they watched Clara work tirelessly day after day, their amusement turned to unease. Had they underestimated her? Was she really going to prove them wrong? Despite the mixed reactions, Clara remained focused. She wasn't doing this for anyone else. She was doing it for herself. Each small victory, the discovery of a hidden compartment holding replacement parts, the satisfying click of a tightened screw, the faint hum of a newly tuned string, brought her closer to her goal. Slowly but surely, the piano began to transform. The scratched wood regained its luster, the missing keys were replaced, and the once silent instrument started producing faint, hesitant notes. It wasn't perfect, not yet, but it was alive in a way it hadn't been in decades. And as Clara worked, she realized something important. Fixing the piano wasn't just about fulfilling a childhood dream. It was about proving to herself, and to the world, that even the most broken things could be mended with patience, effort, and belief. As the weeks turned into months, Clara's dedication to the piano became a regular sight in the neighborhood. Every evening, after finishing her long shift at the bakery, she would return home and immediately get to work. The once dusty porch had been transformed into a makeshift workshop, cluttered with tools, spare parts, and piles of old rags. Neighbors walking by couldn't help but pause for a moment, watching as Clara carefully adjusted the strings or painstakingly polished the wood. Her face was often streaked with dirt, her hands roughened by hours of labor, but there was a quiet joy in her expression that no one could ignore. People began talking about Clara more than ever before. Some still dismissed her efforts as pointless, convinced that the piano would never produce a proper sound again. "It's just a waste of time," one man muttered to his wife as they passed her house. But others were intrigued. They noticed how Clara's persistence never wavered, even when faced with setbacks. Once, after spending an entire afternoon tightening a stubborn string, it snapped suddenly, leaving her frustrated but undeterred. She simply took a deep breath, fetched another replacement, and started over. It was this resilience that slowly won people over. Even those who had initially laughed at the idea of Clara fixing the piano found themselves sneaking glances at her progress, wondering if she might actually succeed. The teenagers who had played the prank were especially conflicted. At first, they had felt smug about their clever joke, imagining Clara's confusion and embarrassment when she saw the broken piano on her porch. But now, every time they rode their bikes past her house, they couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. Clara wasn't reacting the way they had expected. Instead of throwing the piano away or complaining about the prank, she was pouring her heart into it. One evening, as they huddled together near the park, they watched her through the window, her head bent low as she worked. "Do you think she knows it was us?" one of them asked nervously. Another shrugged, but his eyes betrayed his unease. None of them had anticipated the depth of Clara's determination, or the possibility that their cruel joke might lead to something meaningful. Despite the growing curiosity around her, Clara kept to herself most of the time. She didn't seek attention or validation from anyone. Her focus was entirely on the piano. Slowly but surely, the instrument began to change. The once dull wood gleamed under the light, its surface smooth and polished. Missing keys were replaced with ones she had salvaged from an old music shop in the next town over. Inside, the tangled mess of strings and hammers started to resemble the intricate mechanism it once was. Though it still wasn't ready to play, the faint hum of a single note confirmed that Clara was getting closer to her goal. Each tiny success filled her with a sense of accomplishment she hadn't felt in years. One chilly autumn evening, as golden leaves swirled in the wind, Clara decided to test the piano for the first time. She sat down cautiously, her fingers hovering above the keys. For a moment she hesitated, unsure if all her hard work would pay off. Then, taking a deep breath, she pressed down gently. A soft, clear note rang out, filling the air with a sound so pure and unexpected that Clara froze. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized what she had achieved. That single note was proof that the piano, and perhaps even her own dreams, could be revived. Encouraged, she tried another key, then another until a simple melody emerged. It wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful in its own way, a testament to her patience and perseverance. Word of Clara's breakthrough spread quickly through the town. By the next morning, people were stopping by her house just to catch a glimpse of the piano. Some brought coffee or homemade treats as a gesture of support, while others simply stood quietly, listening as Clara played short snippets of songs. The melodies were basic, nothing elaborate, but they carried a warmth and sincerity that touched everyone who heard them. Even those who had doubted her before couldn't deny the magic happening right in front of them. Clara's music seemed to weave its way into their hearts, reminding them of simpler times and forgotten dreams. Among the visitors were the teenagers who had left the piano on her porch. They approached her house hesitantly, their heads bowed in shame. When Clara opened the door and saw them standing there, she didn't say anything at first. She simply looked at them, her expression calm and understanding. Finally, one of the boys spoke up, his voice trembling. "We're sorry," he said, glancing at his friends for support. "We didn't mean to. We thought it was just a joke." Clara listened quietly, then nodded. "I know," she replied softly. "But sometimes jokes can turn into something amazing, don't you think?" Her forgiveness was immediate and genuine, leaving the teenagers speechless. They had expected anger or resentment, but instead they found kindness. Clara invited them inside, showing them the progress she had made on the piano and explaining how each part worked. As they listened, their guilt gave way to admiration. They realized that Clara wasn't just repairing an instrument. She was teaching herself, and in doing so, inspiring everyone around her. Before they left, one of the girls shyly asked if Clara would teach them how to play. To their surprise, she smiled and agreed, saying, "Music belongs to everyone." As winter approached, Clara's life began to change in ways she hadn't imagined. What had started as a personal project had grown into something much bigger. People came from all over the town to hear her play, and soon, invitations to perform at local events began arriving. Clara accepted them graciously, always, playing with the same heartfelt emotion that had captivated her neighbors. Her performances weren't flashy or complicated. They were raw and honest, speaking directly to the soul. After one particularly moving concert, a woman approached her with tears in her eyes. "Your music saved me tonight," she whispered, clutching Clara's hand. "Thank you." Clara's journey also inspired others to pursue their own passions. A young boy who loved drawing started attending art classes after hearing Clara's story. An elderly man took up gardening again, rediscovering the joy he had once felt tending to flowers. Even the teenagers who had pranked her formed a band, using instruments borrowed from the school. Clara didn't set out to change the town, but her actions had a ripple effect, encouraging everyone to believe in themselves and their dreams. The broken piano, which had once been a symbol of mockery, had become a beacon of hope, a reminder that even the most damaged things could be transformed with love and effort. By the end of the year, Clara's house was no longer just her home. It was a gathering place for anyone seeking inspiration or comfort. On weekends, children would sit cross-legged on the floor, learning their first chords on the piano while Clara guided them patiently. Adults stopped by to share stories or ask for advice, finding solace in her gentle wisdom. The small, quiet woman who had once been overlooked by many had become the heart of the community, proving that greatness isn't measured by wealth or fame, but by the impact we have on those around us. And though Clara never sought recognition, her story served as a powerful reminder. Sometimes the things we think are broken hold the greatest potential for beauty. As the months passed, Clara's piano became more than just an instrument. It became a symbol of hope and transformation for the entire town. People who had once dismissed her as unremarkable now saw her in a new light. Her simple act of turning a broken object into something beautiful inspired others to rethink their own lives. The teenagers who had played the prank were especially moved by her kindness and determination. Instead of being punished or shamed, they were welcomed into her home, where she patiently taught them how to play the piano. At first, they were clumsy, their fingers stumbling over the keys, but Clara encouraged them with a smile. "You'll get better," she would say. "Just keep trying." Their lessons quickly turned into something more meaningful. As the teenagers learned to play, they also began to understand the value of hard work and patience. They realized that Clara wasn't just teaching them music, she was showing them how to believe in themselves. One boy named Jake struggled at first, frustrated by his lack of progress. But Clara reminded him of her own journey with the broken piano. "It didn't happen overnight," she told him. "Sometimes you have to take small steps before you can see the big picture." Those words stuck with Jake, and over time he started to improve. By the end of winter, he could play an entire song without making a mistake, a feat that left him beaming with pride. Meanwhile, Clara continued to share her gift with the community. She accepted invitations to perform at weddings, church services, and local festivals. Her performances weren't flashy or complicated. They were heartfelt and genuine, speaking directly to the emotions of her audience. One evening, during a charity event at the town hall, Clara played a melody that brought tears to everyone's eyes. It was a simple tune, one she had composed herself, but it carried so much emotion that people couldn't help but feel deeply connected to it. Afterward, strangers approached her to thank her, sharing stories of how her music had touched their lives. A young mother told Clara that her song reminded her of her late grandmother, while an elderly man said it gave him strength to face another difficult day. Clara listened quietly, humbled by their words. The more Clara played, the more people wanted to hear her. Requests poured in from all corners of the town, and soon she found herself busier than ever. Despite her growing popularity, Clara remained humble. She never charged for her performances, insisting that music should be shared freely. "It's not about money," she explained to those who offered to pay her. "It's about bringing people together and making them feel something." Her generosity only deepened the respect people had for her. Even the skeptics, who had once doubted her abilities, now spoke of her with admiration, calling her the heart of the town. But Clara's influence extended beyond her music. Her story inspired others to pursue their own passions, no matter how impossible they seemed. A shy girl named Emily, who loved painting but feared judgment, decided to enroll in art classes after hearing Clara talk about the importance of following your dreams. An older man named Mr. Thompson, who had given up gardening years ago, started planting flowers again, finding joy in nurturing life. Even the teenagers who had pranked her formed a band, using instruments borrowed from the school. They practiced tirelessly, determined to create something meaningful, just like Clara had done with her piano. Clara's house became a hub of creativity and connection. On weekends, children gathered around the piano, eager to learn their first chords. Adults stopped by to share stories or ask for advice, finding comfort in her gentle wisdom. Clara welcomed everyone with open arms, creating a space where people felt safe to express themselves. Her tiny home, once quiet and overlooked, was now filled with laughter, music, and the sound of lively conversations. Neighbors who had rarely spoken to each other before began bonding over shared interests, thanks to Clara's encouragement. The town itself seemed to come alive, buzzing with energy and renewed purpose. One day, A group of women from the local sewing club surprised Clara with a gift. They had spent weeks working on a quilt, stitching together colorful patches that represented different aspects of Clara's life. There was a patch shaped like a loaf of bread to honor her work at the bakery, another featuring musical notes to celebrate her love for music, and smaller designs that symbolized her kindness and resilience. When they presented it to her, Clara was overwhelmed with gratitude. "This is too much," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't deserve this." But the women insisted, telling her that she had given them far more than they could ever repay. "You've reminded us what it means to dream," one of them said, "and we'll never forget that." Despite all the attention and praise, Clara stayed true to herself. She continued working at the bakery, waking up early every morning to knead dough and bake fresh loaves. Her routine hadn't changed much, except now, people greeted her warmly when she walked through the streets. Children waved at her, calling out her name, while adults tipped their hats in respect. Clara responded with her usual kindness, always ready with a smile or a kind word. To her, nothing had really changed. She was still the same person she had always been. But to everyone else, she was a hero, someone who had shown them the power of perseverance and faith. As spring arrived, bringing with it warmer weather and blooming flowers, Clara organized a special event in the park. She called it a Day of Music and Dreams, inviting anyone who wanted to perform or share their talents. The response was overwhelming. Musicians, poets, painters, and dancers came from all over the town, eager to participate. Even the teenagers' band signed up, nervously practicing their set list in preparation. On the day of the event, the park was packed with families, friends, and curious onlookers. Clara opened the gathering with a speech, her voice steady and sincere. "Today isn't about being perfect," she said. "It's about believing in yourself and sharing your gifts with the world. That's what makes life beautiful." The performances that followed were a mix of skill levels, from polished acts to amateur efforts, but each one was met with applause and cheers. When the teenagers took the stage, their hands shaking as they adjusted their instruments, Clara stood nearby, giving them a reassuring nod. They played a lively tune, their confidence growing with every note. By the end of the song, the crowd was on its feet, clapping and whistling. For the first time in their lives, the teenagers felt truly proud of themselves, not because they were flawless, but because they had dared to try. By the end of the day, everyone agreed that it had been a success. Strangers hugged each other, promising to stay in touch, while children ran around laughing, clutching handmade crafts they had made during the event. Clara watched it all with a contented smile, knowing that she had helped bring the community closer together. What had started as a personal journey with a broken piano had blossomed into something extraordinary. She hadn't set out to change the town, but her actions had sparked a chain reaction, inspiring others to embrace their dreams and support one another. As the sun set over the hills, casting a golden glow across the park, Clara sat down at the piano one last time. She played a soft, melodic tune, letting the notes drift through the air like whispers of hope. People gathered around, sitting quietly as they listened, their faces reflecting the peace and beauty of the moment. Clara's music wasn't just sound. It was a reminder that even the most broken things could be healed with love and effort. And in that moment, surrounded by the people she had touched, Clara realized that her dream had come true. Not because she had become a famous musician, but because she had created something far greater, a community united by music, kindness, and belief in the power of dreams. As summer approached, the town seemed to hum with a new energy. Clara's influence was everywhere, like ripples spreading across a pond. People who had once kept to themselves were now connecting in ways they never imagined. The teenagers' band, which had started as a hesitant experiment, became a regular feature at local gatherings. They practiced tirelessly in Clara's backyard, their confidence growing with each performance. Jake, the boy who had struggled so much at first, emerged as the group's leader, encouraging his friends to push past their fears. "Remember what Clara taught us," he would say. "It's not about being perfect, it's about trying." The band decided to write their own song, something that reflected their journey and gratitude toward Clara. They spent hours brainstorming lyrics, arguing over chords and rehearsing late into the night. When they finally finished, they titled it Broken Keys. The melody was catchy but heartfelt, blending upbeat rhythms with poignant lyrics about resilience and second chances. They wanted to surprise Clara by performing it at the next community event, but keeping it a secret proved harder than expected. Every time they practiced, someone passing by would stop to listen, curious about the lively tune drifting through the air. Meanwhile, Clara continued to inspire others in unexpected ways. One day, an elderly woman named Mrs. Harper approached her after a small concert at the library. She carried a dusty violin case under one arm, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. "I used to play when I was younger," she admitted, her voice tinged with both nostalgia and regret. "But life got in the way, and I stopped. Do you think it's too late for me to start again?" Clara smiled warmly and nodded. "It's never too late," she replied. "Why don't we try together?" From that moment on, Mrs. Harper became a regular visitor at Clara's house. Together, they spent afternoons experimenting with duets, blending the rich tones of the violin with the soft notes of the piano. At first, Mrs. Harper was self-conscious, worried that years of neglect had dulled her skills. But Clara reassured her, pointing out moments of beauty in every attempt. Slowly, Mrs. Harper regained her confidence, rediscovering the joy she had once found in music. Their partnership blossomed into friendship, proving that age was no barrier to learning or connection. Word of Clara's generosity spread even further, reaching neighboring towns. A journalist from a nearby city heard about her story and decided to write an article. He visited Clara's home one sunny afternoon, notebook in hand, eager to learn more about the woman behind the broken piano. Clara greeted him with her usual warmth, offering tea and homemade cookies before sitting down to talk. She spoke candidly about her childhood dreams, her struggles with the piano, and the surprising turn her life had taken since repairing it. When asked how she felt about becoming a local celebrity, she laughed softly. "I'm not special," she said. "I just did what felt right. If anything, I'm grateful for the piano, for my neighbors, and for the chance to share music with others." The article was published a few weeks later, capturing Clara's humility and kindness in vivid detail. It included photos of her playing the piano, surrounded by smiling children, as well as quotes from people whose lives she had touched. Within days, copies of the newspaper made their way into shops and homes across the region. Readers were moved by Clara's story, many writing letters to express their admiration. Some shared their own tales of overcoming adversity, while others simply thanked her for reminding them of the importance of perseverance. Clara read each letter carefully, touched by the outpouring of support. Inspired by the attention, Clara began thinking about ways to expand her impact. She proposed starting a free music program for children in the town, believing that everyone deserved access to the arts. With help from local businesses and volunteers, she transformed an empty storefront into a cozy classroom filled with donated instruments. Children of all ages flocked to the space, eager to learn. Clara taught piano lessons herself, while other musicians from the community offered classes in guitar, drums, and singing. The program quickly became a beloved part of town life, giving kids a safe place to explore their creativity and build friendships. One evening, as Clara sat on her porch watching the sunset, she reflected on how much her life had changed. Just a year ago, she had been a quiet, unassuming woman with a dream that seemed out of reach. Now she was at the center of a thriving community, surrounded by people who loved and respected her. Yet despite her newfound fame, Clara remained grounded. Her focus wasn't on recognition or accolades. It was on making a difference, however small. She knew that true fulfillment came not from personal success, but from lifting others up. The teenager's big moment arrived during the annual summer festival held in the heart of the park. Hundreds of people gathered for the event, drawn by food stalls, games, and live performances. When the band took the stage, nervous but excited, Clara watched from the front row, her heart swelling with pride. As they launched into Broken Keys, the crowd erupted into cheers. The song resonated deeply with listeners, its message of hope and resilience striking a chord with everyone present. By the final note, tears glistened in many eyes, including Clara's. Afterward, the band members hugged each other tightly, overwhelmed by the response. Parents congratulated their children, teachers beamed with pride, and strangers exchanged smiles, united by the power of music. Jake stepped forward to address the audience, his voice steady despite his nerves. "We wrote this song for someone very special," he said, gesturing toward Clara. "She taught us that broken things can still make beautiful sounds, and that it's okay to take risks, even if you're scared. So thank you, Clara, for believing in us." The crowd turned to look at Clara, clapping and cheering as she stood there, blushing but smiling. That night, as fireworks lit up the sky, Clara walked home feeling lighter than ever before. She thought about all the lives she had touched, Mrs. Harper rediscovering her love for the violin, the teenagers finding their voices, the children discovering the magic of music. Each person had added a unique thread to the tapestry of her life, enriching it in ways she could never have imagined. And yet Clara knew her work wasn't done. There were still dreams waiting to be nurtured, still hearts longing for connection. In the weeks that followed, Clara received invitations to speak at schools and community centers in neighboring towns. Though she initially hesitated, unsure if she had anything important to say, she eventually agreed. Her talks were simple but powerful, focusing on themes of resilience, kindness, and the importance of following your passions. Audiences listened intently, hanging on to her every word. Many left inspired, vowing to embrace their own dreams and support those around them. Back in her hometown, Clara continued to nurture the musical community she had helped create. The free music program flourished, attracting students from far and wide. Teachers marveled at the progress their pupils made, not just in skill but in confidence and teamwork. Clara often reminded them that music wasn't about perfection. It was about expression, connection, and joy. "Play from your heart," she would tell the children. "That's where the real magic comes from." As autumn approached, painting the trees with fiery hues, Clara hosted another gathering in the park. This time it was a celebration of growth and gratitude. Families brought dishes to share, musicians performed favorite songs, and artists displayed their creations. In the yar's center of it all stood Clara, surrounded by the people she loved most. She played a medley of melodies on her piano, each one dedicated to someone who had supported her along the way. When she finished, the crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the crisp evening air. Clara looked out at the sea of faces, her heart overflowing with gratitude. She realized that her dream of playing the piano had grown into something far greater, a legacy of hope, unity, and inspiration. What had begun as a solitary pursuit had become a shared journey, weaving countless lives together in harmony. And, though Clara never sought recognition, she understood now that her story mattered, not because of what she had achieved, but because of the light she had brought into the world. As the seasons changed and leaves turned golden, Clara's life continued to blossom in unexpected ways. The town had transformed into a place where creativity thrived, thanks to her quiet but powerful influence. People who had once been strangers now greeted each other warmly on the streets, sharing stories of their progress or dreams they were chasing. Clara's free music program became a cornerstone of the community, drawing families from nearby towns. Children who had never touched an instrument before were now learning scales, chords, and melodies, their faces lighting up with excitement as they discovered new sounds. Clara herself remained humble, always deflecting praise onto others. When parents thanked her for inspiring their kids, she would simply smile and say, "They're doing all the hard work. I'm just here to guide them." Her modesty only deepened the respect people felt for her. They saw how much care and effort she poured into every lesson, how patiently she encouraged even the shyest students to step out of their comfort zones. One little girl named Lily, who rarely spoke outside her home, surprised everyone by singing a solo at the end of summer concert. As she stood on stage, her voice trembling at first but growing stronger with each note. Clara watched from the sidelines, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't just about the music. It was about helping people find their courage. Word of Clara's impact reached farther than anyone expected. A local radio station featured her story during a morning show, inviting listeners to call in and share how someone had inspired them. Dozens of calls poured in, many mentioning Clara by name. Some talked about how her perseverance had motivated them to tackle long-forgotten hobbies, while others credited her with reigniting their belief in kindness and community. One caller, a man in his 50s, shared that he had started painting again after hearing Clara speak at a school assembly. "She reminded me that it's never too late to start over," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And now my paintings hang in my living room instead of gathering dust in the attic." The attention brought opportunities Clara hadn't anticipated. A university in the city invited her to give a keynote speech at their annual arts conference. At first she hesitated, unsure if she had anything meaningful to contribute. But when she thought about the chance to inspire more people, she accepted. On the day of the event, dressed in her best clothes, Clara stepped onto the stage to a standing ovation. She spoke honestly about her journey, the broken piano, the doubts she faced, and the joy she found in creating something beautiful. "Sometimes we think our dreams are impossible because life gets in the way," she told the audience. "But I've learned that even small steps can lead to big changes. All you need is patience, faith, and a willingness to try." Her words resonated deeply with the crowd, many of whom approached her afterward to thank her personally. Some handed her notes or gifts, while others simply hugged her, overwhelmed by the emotions her story stirred within them. One young woman, clutching a guitar case, confessed that she had been considering quitting music altogether. "Your talk reminded me why I started playing in the first place," she said. "Thank you for not giving up, and for showing us what's possible." Back home, Clara returned to her routine, though things weren't quite the same. Strangers began visiting the town, eager to meet the woman behind the inspiring story. Artists, musicians, and writers came to see the place where such transformation had taken root. Local businesses benefited from the influx of visitors, and the town council decided to host monthly art festivals to showcase the talents of residents. Clara played a central role in organizing these events, ensuring that everyone, no matter their skill level, had a chance to participate. The festivals quickly became beloved traditions, drawing crowds from miles away. One chilly November evening, as snowflakes began to fall, Clara hosted a special gathering at her house. She invited all the people who had been part of her journey, the teenagers who had pranked her, the neighbors who had doubted her, the children who had learned from her, and the friends she had made along the way. The cozy living room buzzed, with laughter and conversation as guests enjoyed hot cocoa and homemade cookies. Clara stood quietly in the corner, watching as connections formed and stories unfolded. She realized how far everyone had come since that fateful night when the broken piano appeared on her porch. Toward the end of the evening, Jake, the teenager who had led the prank, stood up to speak. His voice trembled slightly as he addressed the group. "We owe Clara so much," he began. "When we left that piano on her porch, we thought we were being funny. We didn't realize she'd turn it into something amazing, and teach us something amazing in the process." He paused, glancing at his friends for support. "So, on behalf of all of us, I want to say thank you. You've changed our lives, Clara, and we'll never forget that." The room erupted into applause, and Clara blushed, shaking her head. "You don't have to thank me," she said softly. "I'm just glad we could grow together." Her words brought tears to many eyes, including those of Mrs. Harper, who sat beside her clutching her violin case. Afterward, someone suggested a group performance, and everyone eagerly agreed. Clara took her place at the piano, accompanied by Mrs. Harper on violin, the teenagers' band, and several of the children from the music program. Together they played a medley of songs, blending different styles and instruments into a joyful symphony. As the final notes faded, the room fell silent for a moment before erupting into cheers. People hugged each other tightly, overwhelmed by the sense of unity and purpose that filled the air. For Clara, it was a reminder of why she had worked so hard to create moments like this, where hearts connected through shared experiences. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she also knew that the bonds they had built would carry them through any challenges. In the weeks that followed, Clara focused on expanding the music program, partnering with schools and organizations to reach even more children. She introduced workshops for adults too, encouraging parents and grandparents to join in the fun. Families began attending classes together, strengthening their relationships as they learned side by side. Clara often joked that the program had become less about teaching music and more about building bridges between generations. Music has a way of bringing people closer, she explained. It doesn't matter if you're 5 or 50, everyone speaks the language of melody. Her efforts paid off in countless ways. Students from the program started performing at nursing homes, hospitals, and charity events, spreading joy wherever they went. Their performances weren't polished or professional, but they carried an authenticity that touched everyone who heard them. Clara accompanied them whenever she could, her presence adding warmth and reassurance. She loved seeing the smiles on people's faces, knowing that music had the power to heal and uplift. By winter, Clara's house had become a sanctuary for creativity and connection. Neighbors dropped by regularly to rehearse, practice, or simply chat. Artists pinned their sketches to the walls, poets scribbled verses in notebooks, and musicians tested new compositions on the ever-reliable piano. Clara welcomed everyone with open arms, fostering an environment where ideas flowed freely and no one felt judged. It was a space where brokenness was celebrated, not as an end, but as a beginning. One snowy afternoon, as Clara sat by the window watching flakes drift lazily to the ground, she reflected on everything that had happened. Her dream of playing the piano had grown into something far greater, a movement that had touched countless lives. Yet she didn't see herself as extraordinary. To her, she was just a simple woman who had followed her heart and trusted in the goodness of others. And perhaps that was the most remarkable thing of all, her ability to inspire without seeking recognition, to lead without commanding authority, and to love without expecting anything in return. As the year drew to a close, Clara received an unexpected gift, a letter from a publishing company asking if they could write a book about her story. At first she laughed, thinking it was a joke, but when she realized they were serious, she considered it carefully. After discussing it with friends and family, she agreed, hoping that sharing her journey might encourage others to believe in themselves. The book, titled Broken Keys, Beautiful Notes, became a bestseller, introducing Clara's message of hope and resilience to readers around the world. Despite the newfound fame, Clara stayed true to her roots. She continued teaching, performing, and nurturing the community she loved so dearly. Her life was proof that even the smallest actions could spark incredible change. What had begun as a personal quest to repair a broken piano had blossomed into a legacy of inspiration, reminding everyone that beauty could emerge from brokenness, and that sometimes the simplest acts of kindness held the greatest power. As the years passed, Clara's story became a part of the town's history, woven into its fabric like the melodies she played on her piano. The once broken instrument that had started it all now sat proudly in her living room, its polished surface gleaming under the soft glow of sunlight. It was no longer just a piano. It was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even the most damaged things could be mended with love and effort. People from all over came to see it, not because it was fancy or expensive, but because it carried the weight of a journey that had changed so many lives. Clara herself had grown older, though her spirit remained as vibrant as ever. Her hair had turned silver and lines marked her face, but her eyes still sparkled with the same kindness and determination that had inspired everyone around her. She continued teaching music, her lessons filled with laughter, patience, and wisdom. Children, who had been toddlers when she first started the program, were now teenagers, some even pursuing careers in music. They often returned to visit her, sharing stories of how her guidance had shaped their paths. "You taught me more than notes," one former student told her. "You taught me how to believe in myself." The town itself had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. What had once been a quiet, sleepy place was now alive with creativity and connection. Art galleries opened on Main Street, showcasing paintings, sculptures, and photographs created by local artists. Musicians performed at cafes and parks, turning ordinary spaces into stages for self-expression. Even the library hosted regular poetry readings and storytelling nights, encouraging people to share their voices. Clara's influence was everywhere, though she never sought credit for it. To her, it wasn't about recognition. It was about creating a world where everyone felt seen and valued. One spring morning, Clara received a letter that brought tears to her eyes. It was from a young girl named Mia, who lived in a distant city. Mia wrote that she had read Broken Key's beautiful notes and found comfort in Clara's story during a difficult time in her life. "Your book reminded me that I'm not alone," Mia said, "and it gave me the courage to try something new." Enclosed with the letter was a drawing Mia had made, a colorful picture of a piano surrounded by flowers, with the words, "Thank you," written boldly across the top. Clara pinned the drawing to her wall, adding it to a growing collection of letters, photos, and artwork sent by people whose lives she had touched. That summer, the town decided to honor Clara in a special way. They organized a festival called Clara's Day of Music and Dreams, inviting musicians, artists, and performers from across the region to celebrate her legacy. The event took place in the park where so many memories had been made, its grassy fields dotted with tents and stages. Families gathered early in the morning, eager to participate in workshops, listen to concerts, and explore art displays. At the center of it all stood Clara, seated at her piano, playing familiar tunes that drew smiles and applause from the crowd. During the festival, Jake and his band surprised Clara with a performance of Broken Keys, the song they had written years ago. Their sound had matured, blending intricate harmonies with energetic rhythms. As they sang the final verse, the entire audience joined in, their voices rising together in a powerful chorus. When the last note faded, Clara stood up and embraced each member of the band, her heart swelling with pride. "You've come so far," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara addressed the crowd. She spoke simply and sincerely, thanking everyone for their support and reminding them of the power of community. "This isn't my story, it's ours," she said. "Every person here has contributed to something beautiful. Together, we've shown that brokenness can lead to growth, that dreams are worth chasing, and that kindness can change the world." Her words were met with thunderous applause, followed by a moment of silence as people reflected on her message. After the festival, Clara spent more time focusing on what truly mattered to her, her students, her friends, and her music. She slowed down a bit, allowing herself to rest and enjoy the fruits of her labor. But she never stopped dreaming. One day, she began composing her own pieces, weaving fragments of songs she had learned over the years into something entirely new. These compositions weren't complex or technical. They were heartfelt expressions of gratitude, hope, and love. She recorded them and shared them with anyone who wanted to listen, hoping they might bring comfort to those in need. Her greatest joy, however, came from watching others thrive. Former students achieved success in various fields, crediting Clara for instilling in them the confidence to pursue their passions. Artists held exhibitions, musicians released albums, and writers published books, all carrying echoes of the lessons they had learned from her. Even the teenagers who had pranked her years ago had grown into responsible adults, using their talents to give back to the community. They often visited Clara, bringing updates about their lives and expressing their gratitude once again. 1. Winter evening, as snow blanketed the town in a serene silence, Clara sat by the fire, reflecting on her journey. She thought about the challenges she had faced, the doubts, the setbacks, the moments when giving up had seemed easier than continuing. Yet through it all, she had persevered, trusting that even small efforts could lead to meaningful change. She realized now that her dream of playing the piano had been just the beginning. It had opened doors she hadn't known existed, connecting her with people whose lives had intertwined with hers in profound ways. Clara's health began to decline as she entered her later years, but her spirit remained unbroken. Friends and neighbors rallied around her, ensuring she was never alone. They visited regularly, bringing meals, stories, and laughter. On days when she couldn't play the piano herself, someone else would sit beside her and fill the house with music. Clara listened quietly, her heart full of gratitude for the family she had built, not through blood but through shared experiences and mutual care. On her final birthday, the town threw her a celebration unlike any other. Hundreds of people gathered in the park, singing songs, sharing memories, and expressing their love. A banner hung above the stage read, "Clara, the heart of our town." As she sat surrounded by friends, family, and admirers, Clara felt an overwhelming sense of peace. She had lived a simple life, yet it had touched countless others in ways she could never have imagined. Her dream of playing the piano had blossomed into something far greater, a legacy of hope, unity, and inspiration. When Clara passed away peacefully in her sleep, the town mourned deeply but celebrated her life with joy. They planted a tree in her honor near the park, its branches reaching toward the sky like arms embracing the future. Beneath it, they placed a plaque engraved with her favorite saying, "Even broken keys can make beautiful notes." Every year on her birthday, people gathered there to remember her, playing music and sharing stories that kept her memory alive. Clara's story didn't end with her passing. It continued in the hearts of those she had inspired. New generations learned about her through books, festivals, and the countless lives she had touched. Her piano, now preserved as a historical artifact, remained a testament to the power of perseverance and faith. And though she was gone, her presence lingered in every melody played, every painting created, and every act of kindness shared. In the end, Clara's legacy wasn't defined by fame or fortune. It was measured by the ripples she had created, the connections she had nurtured, and the beauty she had brought into the world. She had proven that even the simplest actions could spark extraordinary change, leaving behind a town and a world that was brighter, kinder, and more hopeful because of her.